been reviewed, and we have to approve the plan, and then they have to collect the samples. All the samples are collected and analyzed by an independent lab that is certified by the State Department of Health. So it's a third party now, right? It's another state agency that certifies all the labs in the state. So IDEM has nothing to do with laboratory certification. In this case, most samples have been sent to HML, which I have worked with HML now all my years with the state. As water systems collect samples and send them to HML, and I contact the lab and ask for results and so on. So the lab analyzes it and then sends it to IDEM electronically. And so we look at those sample results, and we look at against the site sampling plan, and then are they present or are they absent? Are they good samples or are they bad samples? And then we apply compliance at that point. Now, in lieu of this situation, since June, I guess, Mark, the operator, has collected over 40 samples throughout the city of Alexandria. All of the samples have been absent, okay? So the EPA uses we have some methods in the rule that are allowed, and for compliance purposes, when a water system wants to comply with the revised protocol form rule, they have to sample and send it to a lab, and they have to use specific methods, laboratory methods. So the sample has to be analyzed in a specific way. And so the most common is the Colilert. It's a bottle, you fill it with water, and it's got a powder in it that takes away the chlorine from the water immediately. And then it has 30 hours to travel to the lab, and then the lab starts the analysis, and then 24 hours later, they look at the color. If it turns color, typically, it's bad. If it's clear, it's good. So the EPA found that there isn't a safe amount of bacteria in a sample. It's got to be zero, right? It's got to be, shouldn't be any. So if that's the standard we're using. If there is, we have to apply compliance. What's the next step? If there isn't bacteria, then we're good. So, so that's what we're looking at. Most of the samples collected by residents that we received have used the plate count. My understanding is that we wanted to know how much contamination or bacteria is in the sample. And that's fine. There are times where we want to know that, okay? Sometimes we do that to see if, what kind of bacteria we're dealing with, or are we getting to a place where are we, improving in troubleshooting a contamination. So, but it's also important to understand that, if they're there, okay, they're there. Now what? Now what happens? What can we do about it? So that's where inspections comes in. We want to troubleshoot it, find out what the problem is, and help get that. So that's the difference between the two samples. But we don't, one of the methods that the EPA allows for compliance, we don't allow the heterotrophic plate count because, we don't care about how many. It's just that they're there or they're not there. So that's why we don't use that type of
real quick, are you saying that you only take tests from the wells and not the end of the distribution center? Is that what you're saying? That's what I'm hearing from your recording, so you're taking from the well, not the end of the distribution center.
No,
Which is
sir.
Where the least amount of chlorine would be, correct?
No, sir. So Alexandria is required to collect 6 routine samples per month.
From the wells?
And these samples are collected according to an approved site sampling plan that we have to review and approve. And these are samples that are several locations that are identified in the distribution system throughout the town. And these locations throughout the distribution system in the town are representative of the whole distribution system. So in fact, we don't require samples at the wells at all, ever. They should never sample the wells unless there is a positive sample in the distribution system. Then, according to the groundwater rule, yes, let's look at the wells to see if that positive sample at such and such a house was caused by a groundwater contamination originating at the well. That's the only time the well would be sampled. Or if there is need for the operators to sample and find out for their own information. So does that answer your question?
I believe so.
Thank you.
Would that be caused to test my water hose outside my house? Because Mark threatened to come to my house and to test it from the water hose because I wanted to use a third party because my child has been one sick at the hospital for several months and she's very little. And I didn't appreciate that at all. I'm new to the community. Everybody here has been very pleasant, very nice, very welcoming. Didn't appreciate that. But would that even have been helpful?
I'm sorry to hear that. It's terrible to go through. No, we would never recommend sampling from a hose. That is not an approved location to be sampling from. So,
And I would also like to say that there will be no trespass probably tomorrow because my life's not touched. I'm afraid to cope with water. I'm afraid to get my kids showered. And I pay for this water. But
We have paper to fill out if you have questions, and we'll take them up to them and they'll answer your questions.
let's see. Okay, baseball assembly.
Yes.
So,
And they went there.
some of the,
Can I make a statement? I think we need to clear up about what a coliform is and what an E. coli is. E. coli is a coliform. So in other words, it would include a lot of other organisms than if you had a coliform. It would include Citrobacter as well as E. coli and several other ones. Any organism that ferments lactose is a coliform. And it's also a gram-negative rod. Just the definition of it. Also, the organism, if you imagine the end of a pin and divide it by 1,000, you've got a bacterium. Now, this bacterium is a very adaptable organism, probably one of the most adaptable organisms in the world. If you were to take that little organism and give it everything it wanted to eat, this will blow your mind. You could fill a sphere the size of the Earth in 39 hours. Now, where do you find something that adaptable? And we're talking about organisms that live in the gut. This is the reason we use coliforms. It's like you said, it's an indicator organism. It's fairly reasonable. The test for it's simple. It's very straightforward and very reliable. Now, E. coli is just one step further. You do another step to look at that, and it's all done with the same test. E. coli fluoresces. Use a fluorescent light and it will fluoresce.
So how does that explain her daughter being sick?
Well, first of all, I think she had a urinary tract infection, right?
From E. coli?
No. It's from E. coli, yes, but it isn't water.
She had E. coli.
Yes, but it can't come from E. coli. Okay, where are you gonna, you're gonna drink it, right?
Or, yeah.
Okay, you're gonna drink it.
Has E. coli in it. Do not swim in such a body of water because it will make you sick. My mother is a nurse, and this conversation has been had several times across several different healthcare workers. I'm not ignorant.
So I
and I'm not going to
have
talk to you about
slides that will go over this from the epidemiology group at the
discussion.
State Department of Health. We haven't had a meeting with them because we wanted to understand what's the process and how come a child was sick with E. coli and it didn't, trigger alarms. So we wanted to ask why. So that's why we set up a meeting with the epidemiology group to understand their work. So I will cover that here in a little bit. But,
Unbelievable.
I have
So-
a question, just real quick.
yeah.
At what point will your PowerPoint presentation focus in on Alexandria and its issues? Because we're 30 minutes into this and we're still talking college level, this is how we treat water.
Right, so our thought was that we could explain more about the water and the background on it. And so in hopes that if we understood a little bit more of how, where it came from, what the requirements are on it, and some of this background, that way it could help understand and answer some of the misunderstandings that exist out there.
Well, I think everyone here knows that the water sometimes comes out of the tap looking darker than the worst urine you've ever seen in your life, and
Never seen
and you've never seen
You
that?
haven't?
You're very
You don't have to
fortunate.
see chemicals in your water.
I posted
There
a
are
photograph
colors and
online on what's happening in Alexandria, and I was literally attacked by residents that said that never happened to them either, so.
So that is something that we get calls a lot, red water and discolored water complaints from a lot of communities throughout Indiana because we have a lot of iron and manganese in the water. And some communities are better suited to remove it than others. So Alexandria with aeration and pressure filtration is able to remove a large portion of that. However, remember that chlorine continues to react with whatever is left over. So it's never 100% removal. So if there is some breakthrough from one day to the other, it will over time eventually react with chlorine and oxidize and settle out in the distribution system. That's why we have to continue to maintain the distribution system and conduct flushing of the distribution system throughout the year, typically twice a year, to sort of move that debris out of the water lines. Now, when there's a fire, or when there's a main break, or when there's flushing going on, or any sort of interruption of the flow, natural flow of the water through the piping, it will disturb that debris and lift it up into the water, and then it'll travel. And unfortunately, people in that path will experience red water, and that is an unfortunate thing. But typically, that is not a hazard, and you just flush that out. It's certainly inconvenient, and I'm sorry that happens.
How do you flush it out of your hot water heater?
Right, so you have to do annual maintenance and so on with hoses and however, how our manufacturers recommend maintenance.
Why should we move? Why, I own my house.
So there have been questions on chlorine residual throughout the town, and so this is an example of June or July MRO, monthly report of operation, that the town fills out and sends in to us. So this is the information that they collect on pH and iron removal. Like I was saying, it's never 100%. See, there's 0.08 on that day. So this tiny little amount of iron is in the water. It's very, very little. It's suspended, but it'll oxidize, and over time, many, many days and months, it will it'll gather in some places. That's why, red water happens. And then on page 2, we have chlorine residuals here that we have the plant tap and then the distribution system. And we look for free and total. Free is available chlorine to continue to kill bacteria. And total is whatever is free plus already reacted with whatever is in the water. And so we look at total, we look for free to make sure there is good residual throughout the distribution system, that in the event that there is a main break and any sort of contaminant might enter the water line, that there is an available barrier of protection to take care of that contaminant should it enter. So these samples are collected at the plant as it's going out, and then out in the distribution system at places around town. Residuals are also collected doing total coliform bacteria sampling, so that we get that information
And
as
this
well.
is available in our virtual file cabinet.
Correct. So all this information is public. You can go to our virtual file cabinet on the IDEM, in.gov/IDEM virtual file cabinet, and you can pull up this information. And you can use, what's their PWS, Public Water Supply Identification Number.
5248001.
5248001. And you can look at all the sample results that Alexandria sends in. You can look at all the correspondence that goes out to them. You can look at any of this information.
Those items that you just showed, is that an industry standard, like for all water treatment plants throughout the state of Indiana?
Yes.
That's the way it should be done?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the state form.
Okay.
And because they feed chlorine, we ask that they do that. If they fed fluoride, we would ask that they sample for fluoride. If they did phosphates, we ask for them to sample for phosphates. They're doing pH, and so those numbers are on par with any other municipality that we would go and inspect. We review these ahead of inspections, and we have had no questions on those numbers that you're saying. All right, so I mentioned that we met with the Indiana State Department of Health, the epidemiology department. So they're a group of scientists, doctors, who they maintain surveillance over the state of Indiana regarding diseases and the spread of diseases, infectious diseases, various types. And their website has all of this information if you want to know what kinds of diseases. Now, waterborne outbreaks are one of them, and that can be from a variety of critters and bacteria, and E. coli is just one of them, okay? So these are actually 3 bullet points that they provided us after our meeting with them as a summary of our discussions, and that what they're looking for, and they work closely with the local health departments. So they create cases. So when they see that there is an E. coli positive sample at someone at a hospital, right? So they're coming in with symptoms of E. coli disease. So they're vomiting, and they have stomach cramps, and they are having nausea and so on, associated with the intestine, because that's how you would get E. coli, specifically Shiga toxin producing E. coli, which is a strain, a type of E. coli bacteria that is causing that person to get sick. They will be treated at the hospital. They will be tested and found to be under sickness of this sugar-producing E. coli, that sample would be sent to the State Department of Health. They would run a DNA test on it, and then they would find, oh, this is an issue. They would send it to the local health department, who would then initiate an investigation. So they would contact that person and that family, and they would talk to people and figure out how and when certain things happen that would cause that person to get sick. And so, so that's how that works. All right. Now, a E. coli positive sample causing a uterine urinary tract infection is not the same thing as this Shiga toxin producing E. coli making someone sick in vomiting and stomach cramps and so on. They're different strains of bacteria, and they are their pathway into the body is very different. Okay, so this bacteria that makes you sick in your stomach, that's from drinking contaminated water, or you're on a boat on a ski and you fall and you take a big swig of lake water. Yeah, you know, that's not safe to drink either. So that's another way that you could get sick with this type of E. coli. But a UTI or that type of contamination, you know, sickness is a different pathway. So while all E. coli are associated with warm gut and feces of warm-blooded animals, you know, you can imagine how you would get that kind of material in the water to drink versus in other places of the body. So that's the difference between the two bacteria.